school committee meeting. And so we're just going to review some housekeeping. As usual, for all of our school committee meetings, this meeting is a public meeting and is accessible via the Zoom link that has been distributed to the community or on Westford Cat. Westford Cat has viewing available either streaming online or through your cable access television. This meeting will also be recorded and posted online with Westford Cat. So if you do have to step out and miss a portion, or if you have a friend or neighbor who isn't able to join us tonight and would like to view it later, it will be available for viewing on Westford Cat online. Ground rules for the evening. This is part of the superintendent search process. This process started during the fall, developing a leadership profile and then distributing postings and soliciting applications. We had 28 applicants. A preliminary screening committee reviewed all 28 of those applications and decided to interview 9 semifinalists. After those 9 semifinalist interviews, that screening committee selected 4 finalists. And tonight we have the first of our 4 finalists joining us tonight. So welcome to Dr. Margaret Adams. This is the culmination of a very long day for Dr. Adams. She's been running a marathon of series of meetings with school leaders, municipal partners, some of our students, teachers, parents from our special education community, as well as an open community forum that just happened earlier this evening. So this is her final meeting for tonight. Congratulations, Dr. Adams, you're near the finish line. This is the interview with school committee. It's scheduled for approximately 75 minutes. And in a few moments, we'll give Dr. Adams the opportunity to make some opening remarks. And then the school committee has prepared about a dozen, maybe a baker's dozen questions prepared. And we're going to pass the virtual mic and ask those questions. And then with our time remaining, any members of school committee can ask any follow-up questions that they'd like, and then give Dr. Adams a chance to make some closing remarks. The final portion of our meeting will be a brief opportunity for school committee members to share any information they've learned. Dr. Adams visited Westford today. We also had the opportunity to virtually visit her district in Melrose earlier this week, but not all members of school committee were able to be there for the entire day. So we're going to share that information with each other publicly, because that way every member of school committee has the exact same information. Every applicant also provides some references, and we've had one member of school committee doing those reference checks. So again, we're going to share that information publicly so that everybody knows we all have the same information. The one thing that we will not be doing this evening is any sort of deliberation. This is just information sharing so that we're all on the same page. All deliberations among school committee will take place at our final meeting after all 4 interviews have occurred. Next Thursday, March 18th, will be the deliberation and vote. And that will all be done publicly, and you can join us back here on Zoom or Westford Cat. So, Alicia, did I forget anything?
I don't think you forgot anything. I would like to extend a thank you once again to Dr. Adams for providing us contacts so that we could have site visits with your district, and for visiting our district as well. And I want to again thank the preliminary screening committee for all of their work, and the public for your help all the way back when we started with the leadership profile and the surveys, through your feedback that you'll provide us now. We can't make this decision without you. We are making a decision for the whole of Westford, so we really appreciate your feedback. And to that end, there will be a link in the chat at the end of this session that will take you to a SurveyMonkey survey where you can give us your feedback on tonight's events.
Thank you, Alicia, and also thank you to school administrative staff who helped us with organizing everything and setting everything up for all of these meetings. I know we're doing this in a virtual context, which is unique and has required some additional coordination. So thank you also to the search subcommittee, Alicia, Sean, and Chris for all the extra work that you've put in on this year. So with that, I will turn the mic over to our guest. Welcome, Dr. Adams, and we're here to listen to your opening remarks.
Hi, thank you very much. I've had a great day. You have an amazing community and a lot to be proud of. You have great students. They had the toughest questions out of any group, and very thoughtful. And your community is warm, welcoming, and it would be a pleasure to be honored and humbled to be the superintendent of such a welcoming community. You really care for each other, and want to do what's best for all members. There's a real sense of collaboration and strong communication among departments, among school leaders and educators, and that spirit was clearly evident today. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm for 9 years, I've been the assistant superintendent for teaching and learning in the Melrose Public Schools. And in that role requires the coordination of the curriculum, instruction, assessments. It requires, and I lead efforts around professional development for the district of all staff, including our school leaders, and integral in planning and writing our strategic plan. Last year, in spite of the pandemic, in school closing, we presented a 3-year strategic plan, a 3-year technology plan as well, and sort of led those efforts along with staff and community members, and led efforts, currently leading efforts to write an equity plan for our district that really actionalizes some of our goals around equity and diversity for our district, and really sets a plan for us moving forward of how we continue to build equitable, inclusive learning environments for all our students. And prior to that, I also have worked in Malden as sort of a curriculum director in charge of literacy and ESL programming, as well as worked in Brockton in charge of ELL programs. My first love in education was as a 2nd and 4th grade teacher at the elementary level. And my first entry and passion into learning was around teaching kids how to read and early math instruction as well. One of the hardest other questions comes from young people is, what do I do for fun? Came from the young journalist at Westford Academy, or what's something fun that someone should know about you? My greatest pride and joy are my 2 children. They'd hate me saying so, but they're deeply part of who I am. My 17-year-old Malcolm, learning to drive, has his first job, and he's growing up to be a great young man. And my daughter Teresa, who's 14. They've taught me a lot about middle school and high school age children, and how they have a lot to teach us, and show us about what the world is, and our responsibility also to prepare them for the world that they're entering. And so they're my great pride and joy. I spend much of my free time watching them play hockey or baseball or soccer, and living vicariously through their activities. But chauffeuring, like many families, chauffeuring them all over the place. But I enjoy, and I'm trying to enjoy all those moments that I have with them. That's a little bit about who I am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adams. And now I believe the first question is from Committeewoman Adam.
Yes, hi. Dr. Adams, welcome and thank you for being here tonight. First question I have for you is, there are many paths to the office of superintendent, many different districts to work in. With a variety of paths and options available to you, why Westford, why you as a candidate, and why now?
When I was looking, for me, now is a good time to be a superintendent. I want to find a place where I can spend the next 8 to 9 years. It depends how you look at the retirement chart, where before I retire, I think it's 9, and spend it in one place and really devote the remainder of my career in one place. If I'm going to make that change into the superintendency, it feels like right now is the right time. I think my kids are at that age where I do think sometimes they need you more when they're teens, but they need you differently when they're teens. And so it feels like the right time for my family, and the right time for me personally to take that jump. And it was important for me to balance both my family and my professional responsibilities. And so it felt like that was the why now. The why Westford is when I was looking at communities and applying, I really felt that it was a community that was really supportive of the schools. There was a strong collaboration between town and schools and really striving to do what's best for all students. Some of the work the district has tried to do and put on paper around equity and diversity and striving to take steps to be more inclusive or and equitable are things that sort of mirror the work that we're also doing in Melrose. The interest and desire to also think about the social emotional learning needs of students and also really well connects well with some of the work we're doing here in Melrose. And it felt like a lot of the things that we're thinking of really were strengths and things that we've tried to develop here. And I felt like I had much to offer in that way to the district. You also are a district, I think it feels like you don't want to rest on laurels. You have high academic achievement, but you also want to be in a cycle of continuous improvement and sort of thinking about really keeping what you value and keeping what's working, but also thinking about how do you prepare students for the 21st century and move them forward. So there's a desire to be innovative and looking forward. And I think that's something we've also strived to do. I've strived to do with my staff is say, how do we continually be in a cycle of improvement and getting better? And so do we make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students and really preparing them for the 21st century.
Thank you. Gloria, can I ask a follow-up? Okay. Dr. Adams, how do you see yourself becoming part of the Westford community?
I think one of the things I've strived to always do is really build really strong relationships. Whenever we hire new staff, really getting to know staff by name, really understanding and trying to be really visible in the schools so that you really try to understand and live where the action happens in schools and really walk in the shoes of teachers as much as you can and school leaders so that you feel and can advocate for what the needs are and really represent them well. And that also goes for being as visible as possible within the community and really outreaching and engaging community groups. One of the structures we have in Melrose that has worked really well for the past 9 years that I'd wanna, if you don't have one, start is we have a citywide PTO and it's representatives from each of the PTOs, including our CPAC and our ELL PAC, meet once a month with the superintendent. And other staff members go in and out of the meeting. But it's a way to sort of collect questions, concerns, address them, and provides a feedback loop where parents are giving us some feedback and we're also responding. And so it's done in a spirit of collaboration so that we can continually be meeting the needs of our students. We have to really open up that feedback loop and finding ways and systems and structures to do that. We also developed a strong labor management committee that meets on an ongoing basis, as well as at a school level labor management that help address any issues that are coming up right away before they escalate and sort of in a spirit of communication and collaboration. So those are two examples of sort of developing some feedback loops where you're listening and hearing what's going on. I take a stance of curiosity in sort of some of those conversations as sort of saying, I sort of say, tell me more about that. I want to understand more and really try to dig deeper instead of saying, well, this is the way it should be. And really thinking thoughtfully about what the perspective of folks are. And sort of that helps me understand so that I can advocate and support for whatever the concern or the issue and advocate for the future and sort of think short term and sort of long term. So having those feedback loops and systems and structures that allow for that, I think is really important.
Very good, thank you. I'll pass
Good
it
evening,
to
Dr. Oh, sorry, Gloria. Good evening, Dr. Adams. So as you know, a school district's primary mission should always be about education, right? But for the classroom experience to be successful for our little guys and little girls, the Westford schools must also provide a range of services, including human resource supports for approximately 800 employees, right? Regular school bus and special education transportation, school food services, maintenance and the cleanliness of facilities, technology, infrastructure, health services, and counseling support. And there's plenty more beyond that. So what in your professional experience qualifies you to lead and manage such a large and varied organization that serves nearly 5,000 students and their families?
So I can't pretend to know everything about everything, but one of the things I have strived to do in Melrose and in my work is develop capacity of others and work alongside them. You know, I don't know a lot about transportation, but I want to rely on the people who do, get super curious, ask lots of questions, and work alongside and really try to understand that process and what's involved, understanding the finances, how do we ensure health and safety on buses, what are the policies and procedures that are in place, are they working, and really do a deep dive and understand. And so that in that way, you can really be responsive and also start to think creatively about are there efficiencies sort of in any of those pieces that can support the budgets, your budget shortfalls that you have? Are there ways that we can think creatively about some of those resources? You know, it's really, and also I think it's valuing the contributions each of those have to the schools. Every single person is vitally important. From our educators to our bus drivers to our to our nurses, they all play vital roles. And sort of the superintendent, in the same way they have to know and understand what's happening in the schools, they really have to know and understand what it's like to walk in the shoes of all of those other folks who really, as a system and a structure, really help us maintain safe learning environments for our students. And sort of I have to understand and learn and be able to advocate for them as well, and really develop the capacity of others to do so by walking alongside them and understanding, and at times allowing them to do their work and supporting them in their work, and sort of asking lots of questions that ensure that we're doing the best we can with all our resources. And pushing them to think creatively and look forward. I mean, I think I always have a stance of how do we look forward to do better with the resources that we have, sort of, and not just maintaining the status quo, but really thinking about how we better meet the needs of our students. Our world has been in upheaval for the last year, and it's going to require us to think about all of our resources as we prepare in the next month to bring back all our students. And as we prepare to bring back all our students next year, we're going to need to think thoughtfully about how every single one of those people and their role in supporting the well-being of our students as they return. Because one person can't do it alone, and we need to work as a team and develop each other's capacity to meet the needs of our students and families.
Thank you.
Good evening, good night, Dr. Adams. So during the last year, what we found out is that traditional classroom may not be for everyone, and then remote and hybrid models during the pandemic have forced us to rethink how we approach learning. So how, if we bring the students back and then in future years, how will you incorporate those lessons learned during the pandemic and broaden the educational experience of our students to include a range of pedagogical approaches.
So what we've learned lots of lessons during this time, and we need to leverage those in the future. One of the lessons we learned about the importance of community and the social emotional learning health of our students, and the need for connection and relationship building. When we implemented our plan for hybrid and remote learning, we incorporated a component that we've learned works well of community circles every morning in our elementary, and a structure for community circles in our middle school and high school, where kids have another adult that they connect with every day who's checking in on them and helping build really strong relationships. And I think as we think about the healing that needs to happen across our communities, we really need to think about, in Melrose, we're talking about how do we maintain that structure for next year, because our students are going to need it even more. We're also going to have to we've also learned that we need to really purposely plan for the executive functioning skills our students need in order to be successful, the self-regulation skills they need in order to be successful as they return back to school. And for some students, when they return back in September, they'll be out of school almost a year and a half or a year and a couple of months. And it's really important that we help build the skill set that all of us are having challenges being on electronic devices and giving all of our attention for long periods of time. So we're going to have to help our students build up those skills over time. And I see it in my two young people is their skills for attention is dwindling, right? And we need to build those back up. I think we need to also make sure that there's a balance with technology. I wouldn't want us to see that we become schools where we see kids on devices all day long in our schools. I really want to value the relationships, the books that kids hold in their hands and are able to read, the pens and paper that they're able to put in hand, and really leverage instead technology as a tool for creation of new knowledge, of gaining knowledge, of problem solving, of reaching out to the wider world, and sort of really using technology as a tool and not the only means for our instruction. And I want to return back to some of that. I think technology has become almost our central way of communicating some information to our young people, and we want to keep some of that, but also relegate it as a tool so that there's balance. And I think that and some of the techniques and strategies we've learned about online teaching can serve us well as we continue to use technology as a tool. I think we've been able to leverage technology to get people together. I'm pretty sure the community meeting I had an hour before, if it was in person, it wouldn't have had 50 plus people there because it's a challenge to get people together. It allows us to be able to be cooking dinner and have our children at home and still be present and engaged. So those are things that I think we want to also continue, is to use technology to bring people together across wide groups and be able to have these forums be a place where we can engage wider communities. And we've certainly found that as well. So I think continuing to leverage the technology for the purpose of bringing communities is an important one.
Good evening, Dr. Adams. It's good to see you again.
Likewise.
Meaningful and effective equity and inclusion can mean different things to different people. What does it look like to you? And how do you communicate the how and the why to someone who's resistant? And if you could please give us some examples of your work in this area.
So I think it's our moral and ethical responsibility to educate all students and have all students have access to high rigorous instruction. So that's a given, and nothing, that's a line we draw on the sand. That's our responsibility and our moral and ethical responsibility. And so And our students, we know when they see themselves represented in the curriculum, have higher achievement. They're more engaged. And so that's also our responsibility. It's our responsibility to be thinking about how are we supporting our young people to be the civically engaged and to be able to work across diverse cultures. That is the world that they're going into, and we have a responsibility to do so. So those are strong values for me, and those are what I will communicate on an ongoing basis. We are about providing equity for our students so that students are getting what they need in order to be successful, that our students see themselves represented in our curriculum and in our instruction, that we're culturally responsive. But our students also have to be able to see the diversity of the world represented. And they also have to be able to engage with that diversity of our community and our world. And we need to provide opportunities for that in the community and with the wider community. I think when I've had resistance, I've listened and I said, I hear you, but as educators, my responsibility and our responsibility is to educate all students and to ensure that all students have equitable access. And that's what public education is about. That is our work. And that's not going to change. And that's our moral and ethical responsibility. So us as educators will be moving forward with ensuring those opportunities for all our learners. And that's in our standards as well. If you dig deep into our standards across all our content areas are asking students to be problem solvers, communicators across diverse cultures and diverse understandings of diverse perspectives, civically engaged. That's all part of our state standards. And so that is our work. And we're striving towards it. In Melrose, I think part of your question is examples of my work. In Melrose, we have been doing lots of training and profession of our teachers around understanding our own biases and how these creep into our classrooms, about microaggressions, in our also thinking about how we provide gender inclusive classrooms and support our LGBTQ+ youth in our schools, and how our curriculum is also responsive to that, to those youth and families. And we've been doing a lot of work, but we haven't necessarily actionalized it and said, these are the things we're going to do. So right now we're in the process of developing an equity plan. And we have a semblance of 4 drafted goals and an action plan by the end of this year. So it does the same thing our strategic plan and our tech plan does, where we say, these are our goals, these are our objectives, and here's our plan to move forward in year 1, in year 2, and year 3. So we actionalize and start to have some short-term and long-term goals that we're working towards. And in those strategic plans and tech plans, I tend to be ambitious and know that we may not meet them all, but know that we're striving towards them. And sort of making sure that we're doing periodic checks, and there's a system to periodically check on our progress, and having a group of educators and other stakeholders who are helping us be accountable in doing those checks and looking for those outcomes that we've set out for ourselves, and being in that continual cycle to continue to improve.
Thank you.
So a public school system is really only as good as its educational staff. Mm-hmm. And Westford takes great pride in our educators, from the traditional classroom to our special educators, our specialists, interventionists, teaching assistants. They all impact the lives of our students. So can you provide examples of ways in which you have worked to develop, support, and retain high quality educators?
So we've developed a very strong teacher induction program so that we help support our educators feel really supported right from the beginning. with some strong coaching, really strong mentoring program, where they have multiple people that are supporting them and helping them be better, by providing co-teaching opportunities where they're co-teaching with a coach, a coach modeling for them, being able to go see other educators, and really helping wrap around those new educators so they're super successful, planning for them right when they're hired in the summer, and developing some new teacher programming in the summer so that they know what the curriculum are, they know where the resources are, they have clear materials and lots of guidance about how to get started and how to proceed, so that it's not like, oh, here's the keys to your classroom and go to it. It's really, we've really provided lots of support, and that allows educators to feel supported, and they stay because they've developed some really strong relationships, both with their school leaders who are giving them feedback, and the coaches and mentors that they have in their grade level colleagues and other professional learning communities that they belong to. We've tried to create really sort of informal professional learning communities also, where people can get together. And we've done this through book studies and sort of synchronous and asynchronous professional development, and sort of develop these professional learning communities where staff can continue to discuss and grow in their learning as educators, and work together and collaborate. I think it's important in Melrose, we also tried to, through the contract and through an override, address teacher salaries, as well as, because that's important also to teachers, and tried to address and raise the base for our teachers so that we're as competitive as the districts around us, so we can also retain our staff. I think looking at innovative ways, with the pandemic, it never got to fruition, but sort of looking to ways that we can provide, like working with banks and providing first new teacher mortgages, and so that they can take roots in communities, are all creative ways where we might help retain teachers in different ways, beyond just like salary. What are other ways that we can keep them? You have a very veteran staff already. And so they stay. So you're doing a lot of great things already. They're very deeply committed, and your school leaders as well, to the community. And so one of the questions I want to ask is, ooh, folks are staying. They feel really supported. How is that, and why are they staying? And how do we make sure to continue to do that? Because your staff is already very veteran and is sticking with you very long term. And I met some of them today. And they deeply care for each other and their colleagues. And that seems to be also a reason why they stay. And the community supports them. And so that also feels that that's a reason they also stay.
Thank you for recognizing that. I'm glad you were able to visit with them today. I'm sorry, you're up, Valerie.
Hi, Dr. Adams. Nice to finally meet you.
Nice to meet you, Valerie.
In a high achieving district like Westford, sometimes our students are afraid to take risks or make mistakes. Modeling healthy risk taking and being willing to admit our own mistakes is one way to help combat this issue. In that spirit, please tell us about a time that you took a risk professionally and perhaps made a mistake, and what you learned from that experience.
Oh, that's a good question. I think we've certainly probably made a lot of mistakes over the past year as we've tried to be responsive and try to get students into school and meet the needs of students as quickly as possible. I think sometimes what mistakes that I may have made were that we moved probably way too quickly and not gotten enough feedback and input on particular pieces. Like I'm trying to think of implementing like a writing curriculum when I first started in Melrose. Is we just got started and start putting it into place and not getting enough feedback to say, does this really meet the needs of the students, and how would you adapt and adopt, how you massage this and change it. And so really providing some feedback loops for implementation early on. And we've tried to do that more as time has gone on, and sort of creating opportunities for staff to give feedback, and providing lots of and providing lots of information and checkpoints along the way. I think right now, one of the things we're also, as our teachers are taking, we've been doing work again this year, really trying to think about our own biases and microaggressions and racism in our community and systemic racism in our schools and our system as a whole and in the nation. Our teachers are trying to do some things with students and trying to really think about the curriculum to have kids start to think about these issues. And one of the things we've learned is that our parents aren't necessarily poised well enough to have these conversations. And so their kids are having these conversations at schools led by teachers, and then they're coming home and having those conversations, and parents aren't necessarily, they're like, I don't know how to talk about this with my child. And when my student asks these questions about what is racism, does racism still exist, and what is segregation, and does segregation still exist? And they didn't know. And so we didn't prepare our parents enough as we were trying to do some of that to have those conversations with their students as well. And so that was sort of something I didn't quite expect. And we've gotten that feedback a couple of times and are thinking about, okay, how do we prepare our families to have the same conversations that we are trying to have as adults, as educators? And we're also starting to have with students and have them critically think about the history and critically think about the concepts they're learning from all different perspectives.
Okay, hi, Dr. Adams. I think I'm up next. And, you know, the end of your last answer just points out something, which is you can't always please everybody with a decision. And so I'd like to hear if you could please provide an example of a time when you made a decision that proved to be unpopular in the end, but that you felt was in the best interest of students. And so if you could talk about what happened and then how you responded.
I think sort of, I think that last question, the discussions around creating places in our schools to talk about racism and systemic racism in our communities and in our nation is a controversial one. And not everyone is ready. Our students are ready. They want to talk about this. And they want space to talk about this. And so I think we have to also create opportunities and work in collaboration with the community to start to engage in community-wide conversations so that as our students are having these conversations, the community is also engaging in those. And the schools are doing that work. And so in Melrose, we've been trying to work. We have a Melrose Racial Justice Coalition. And so we're trying to collaborate with them. Our city has established a group as well. And so we want to work in conjunction and collaboration as the schools develop some equity goals. We want to also do it in conjunction with the schools. And I think that's been challenging. I think some families have said this doesn't belong in schools, or it's not the right place for it in schools. Another place where it happened is we have been trying to make our literature inclusive of LGBTQ+ youth and families. And some families felt that also may not belong in the schools or doesn't have a place in the schools, but sort of saying, yep, it does, because all our students have the right to be represented and all our families have the right to be represented. And that is an important value to our schools. We have the responsibility ethically and morally to educate all students. So I think that at times that might not be a popular one, but it's a value that is very strong and I stand by it. And at times I've had some pushback and more at the early childhood level is how did those books sort of children's literature gets used at the young ages. But a sign that our students are ready for it, we did a survey of our students at the high school about books and how they felt about the book selections and some of the changes we've made. And they clearly said they wanted more books about LGBTQ plus youth. We didn't have enough. They did not feel that they were adequately represented in the books that we've selected. And they were giving us that feedback, which is an important one and one we hadn't considered. So our youth are ready and want to create spaces for all people to be represented in their school communities.
Thank you.
So this is a tough one.
Oh, geez.
What is a book or film that you've read or seen recently that you've enjoyed?
Oh, I'm a big fan of Libby, and I have to like pull up my phone because I can't remember the name. But I was reading Promise. Is it Promised Land by Obama? Promised Land by Obama, and then it's a 30-hour audiobook. I'm an audiobook. I spend quite a bit of time in my car driving, including hockey games all over the state. So my children are subjected to these audiobooks as well. And I was listening to Promised Land and I was loving it. And it's 30 hours. So you only get to borrow it from the library for 14 days. And I ran out of time. So I'm back in the queue to finish reading it. But he doesn't, it's different than Michelle Obama's. I loved Michelle Obama's book. But it's different than her book because he kind of takes you lockstep through his administration and how he ended, through that. But there are these beautiful moments where he talks about his children and about leadership that are quite humbling. For example, he talks about going to Walter Reed Hospital and being so impacted by the veterans who had given their service and being so humbled by the responsibility that he had to the nation and to the families, and how it really struck him how important that was. And often he says that presidents are told not to do that because it clouds their judgment about making challenging decisions about sending armed forces into harm's way. But he says it really made him a better leader because he understood the impact and the responsibility and the service of the veterans. And there are just these moments where he has you practically in tears. And then he goes back into lockstep through some of the decisions he makes. And so it's a great read, but it's 30 hours as an audiobook. He kind of reads it in his style. And I can't wait to get it back because I'm hoping to be able to finish it. I was at about 22 hours and it went away.
Well, I hope you're back at the top of the queue soon. Thank you.
That was an easy question.
Libby's great, but it's one of the downsides to it. You do have to wait some time. Yeah.
Yes.
Dr. Adams, our town really prides itself on being a high achieving district that also values social emotional balance for students. Can you provide some examples of ways that you sought to balance high academic achievement for students with their physical, social, and emotional well-being?
Yeah, so one of the things that happened at our high school, we were part of that Mass Insight grant that allowed us to really focus and provide more AP training for our teachers. And the goal of that grant was to get more kids into AP courses. And we took off all the requirements for AP. So APs are open to all students. If you want to take the course, you can take the course. We raised the number of students who were taking APs. Students were taking APs, more APs. We started opening up. Our 9th graders can take AP biology. Our 9th graders can also take Western Civ if they want AP Western Civ if they want to. And I think in doing so, we had more students taking more APs and sometimes more stressed out students. So the high school created an AP lab that allowed them to have a period where they had an educator on hand to help them and it was part of their schedule. And it allowed them to get support with specific things they may be struggling with. So it helped them get a place where they can felt that their needs were being met if they were struggling in some way. So it became this academic support, but I think it also supports the social needs of students feeling stressed out. And in some cases, that's around some of the writing demands that are in some courses, is the kids don't necessarily have the writing skills that the AP course is expecting, or they need help with some study strategies and skills to help them conquer the content that they're trying to cover. In Melrose, we've worked really hard at a positive behavior intervention system that really outlines tier 1 with clear behavioral expectations for students. And we teach them to students pre-K through 12 at the beginning of the year with lessons, and we return to them throughout the year. And they're connected to the school pride. So like our Roosevelt school is the Roosevelt Ravens, and each letter stands for a value that they have, and they're working towards strong relationships and being independent learners in the school. And so they're really trying to integrate that. So it becomes part of who we are. And we're building those skills for students from pre-K through 12. I'm a big believer, as much as possible, we need to, it's not that, oh, they're just the high schools doing this. It's a pre-K through 12, and we're building this structure that if they start in kindergarten and we give kids consistent language, that by the time they get to 9th and 10th grade, it's just part of who they are. It's part of the way things are done, and kids are internalizing the beliefs around, okay, I'm going to be an independent, self-directed learner. I'm going to be a problem solver. I'm going to work towards good communication. I'm going to strive to be civically engaged and a responsible citizen. And the more we use that common language, the more we build those skills that kids need to be successful. We've been also thinking about how we move from teacher-directed to student-centered and student-driven classrooms, where students are taking responsibility for their learning, and we're coaching and supporting them, and providing the skills that they need to be student-driven and goal set, and have the executive functioning and the organization and the planning skills in order to be successful. And I think those kind of underlying skills sort of support the academics, but we have to pay attention to them. Sometimes we say, well, we taught organization, but sometimes we didn't do it explicitly enough. Or we did it in 6th grade because we know the kids are moving into middle school, but we didn't necessarily build a pathway all the way through. Or we do a little bit here and there, and we just have to be really explicit about how we teach those particular skills so that our kids are successful and are also paying attention to their own social emotional learning health as well. We've incorporated things like mindfulness and really tried to incorporate brain breaks. I think I said this, it's a little blurry right now if I said this in another group, but when we planned our schedule this year in the pandemic, we made space for community circles in a real, I think I did say this already in this group, but we made space in our schedule and really put it in this, because if we value it, it should be in the schedule. We need to make time for social emotional learning and really be explicit where that's going to happen. And so we made a real purposeful decision to include that in our schedule. And that's one thing we certainly want to retain for next year.
Thank you.
Dr. Adams, I'm wondering, so no school district is perfect, Westford included. And so when negative behaviors arise, whether it be, or discipline issues, so it could be students' behavioral concerns, it could be staff conflict, the community must respond in a way that's effective and sustainable and culturally sensitive. And so I know you talked a little bit about some of the things around student social emotional health, but I hope in PBIS, but I hope you can go a little bit deeper and maybe broaden it a little bit too, to talk about staff and just overall district culture by providing examples of how you've built a culture of trust and responsiveness.
So one of the structures we've used, and I've learned, and I wasn't necessarily a believer at first, but using restorative practices community circles. We've worked a bit with the Center for Social Justice, Center for Restorative Justice at Suffolk University. And once I attended the training, I was sold. It is really a way when we sit in a community circle, it's a structure that has great power because you're forced to listen. And I think in many cases, we often try to respond and talk instead of listen and sort of hear and really engage in really listening and seeing each other and hearing each other. And that structure has worked well in the past year and a half, and we used that structure last spring as the nation was sort of dealing with issues around racism. Our staff wanted to talk about it. And how do you have conversations about race in a productive way where you can see and hear each other's perspective? And we did that by holding a circle where we go around and we take turns holding the virtual talking stick and use really poised questions to have the community engaged in dialogue. And it's a structure that served well as we thought about coming back to school. We use the same structure with our parents. So where we see and hear with a well-poised question, we go around and listen and hear each other. It allows every voice to be heard, every person to be seen. And it doesn't necessarily mean there's consensus at the end, but it does, I think there's value and people want to be seen and heard. And in doing so, then you can be more responsive in the way you communicate, even if your decision is not the one they wanted. So you can say, I heard you, and I'm going to be responsive to your concern, but that's not possible because of X, Y, and Z, and being really clear and communicative. And so I think that's a real structure that's worked well, and that I want to see how, what structures you have already in place that support that dialogue and how we can build upon that and sort of create those spaces where people can be seen and heard.
Great, thank you so much.
Sorry, it's me. So you just actually mentioned that if something's valued, you want to put it in the schedule. Mm-hmm. So to that, it's often said that budgets are moral documents. You put in that what you value. What is the process you have used to gain feedback from your staff in formulating a budget that reflects the values of the district?
So our budget process has been a team one, and it's been multiple opportunities for folks to give feedback on the budget process from the school leaders, school site council, engaging our PTOs as well. And through that dialogue, we sort of create a narrative of what we value and what we are retaining. And so that as each conversation builds, we're very clear on what the budget, what's in the budget is because we value it. And we create a narrative of what else we need, even if it's sometimes not always funded, but we're creating this narrative of what the future needs are for the district and looking forward and sort of building over time a narrative that is supportive of the needs of the school. I think it's important to create a year-long narrative about the great things that happen in school, so that the only time people hear about, oh, these great things are happening is when you're trying to defend them in a budget is not going to work. And so we really need to highlight, oh, here's what this classroom is doing, and here's what the teachers are doing, and really creating a great buzz about the great work that happens. And I know you're doing that, the teachers and school leaders are doing already great things, and we just need to showcase that a lot. And where are there opportunities to bring the community into the school so they can see that firsthand? So one of the things, like, for example, our 12th graders used to do a senior research project, and it's been turned into a capstone that asks them to engage in their own research and engage with the community and then present it. and try to think, well, that's a great place to ask the community to come in and listen to what the seniors are doing. Some of their projects are just outstanding and inform the community at large. And that builds interest in what's happening in the schools and supports the budget when you go in front of your finance committee, in front of town meeting, because hopefully you've had some of those town meetings in that senior capstone class listening to what the students were doing. And so the more that happens, the more the community says, yes, well, let's support this because it supports the students and they're doing great work. And these are the future town meeting members and finance committee members and voters of our community. And we need to support what's happening there. So I think that's that year-long process that needs to happen. So that the value shows up in that budget, but it's that you've created this clear narrative of the great things that are happening in the schools.
So I guess there was a second half to the question, which I guess I should have read to begin with. It says, then how do you communicate budget challenges to the community at large while also conveying the district impacts to students and staff?
So I think sometimes it takes multiple years to have something happen, get to fruition. Like we knew as a district, we had library media specialists in our middle and high school, but not in our elementary. And that was something our parents had been running our libraries, but we knew we wanted leadership in our libraries. And the parents had done a phenomenal job fundraising for our libraries, but we also know we needed staff in order to support. And so we start creating a narrative over several years about the importance of library media specialists. And then we got creative as we added more specialists in order to cover contractual obligations. We said, oh, let's have one or two of those people be library media specialists so that we can have them as a resource in our building while they're also providing for some of our specialists contractual obligations at our elementary level. And so that didn't happen over 1 year. It happened over several years, and then we were finally able to get creative, but it's creating that narrative over several years about how do you advocate over time for some of those needs in a tight budget cycle where it's sort of kind of feels incremental, but those incremental, like that one library media specialist, we got 1 year, and then we increased the following year to 1.5, has had a great impact already in our schools and in the quality of the programming we provide for our elementary students.
Thank you.
Hello. As the Chief Executive Officer of the district, how do you keep your committee informed? In particular, what's your strategy around issues that are your responsibility, but where the school committee may have an interest?
So I think I kind of think of the role of working alongside of the school committee with like 3 principles in mind. One about ongoing communication of what's going on and really establishing a strong relationship, working through the chair and really establishing strong relationship with the chair, as well as communicating on an ongoing basis. Using that as an opportunity to celebrate the great things that are happening in schools, but also really helping the school committee be informed. Another one is around mutual respect. I think all of you serve different stakeholders that those of us in the schools may not have access to. And so you have information, as well as the educators and school leaders, district leaders have information. And so by sharing that information and being able to listen and hear concerns and questions, and also the great things that are happening, we can work better to serve our constituents and our stakeholders. And the third is around collaboration, is really wanting it to be a collaborative and supportive, where the schools can help, where you're supporting the work of the schools, and we're also supporting the important role that you play within the community as representatives of the community voice. And so we have to honor that and work in collaboration with each other. And so those are kind of the three pieces of sort of my approach to working with the school committee, really being communicative, one of mutual respect, and striving towards collaboration.
How do you view the superintendent's role with town administration, given that Westford consistently ranks high in academic performance, but has a budget that spends significantly less per pupil than comparable districts?
So you already have a strong, it feels like you have a strong relationship with the town, and in the sense that the schools work in conjunction with the town and the town works in conjunction with the schools. I think it's important to incrementally over time make a case for some of the needs and really help provide information about some of that over time and build a case with the different constituents. And it's that finance committee, it's town meeting members, it's the select board and the town manager, and really having really good relationships with all of those folks that we are working in conjunction and in support of each other. And really making cases and advocating for some of those needs incrementally over time, and really supporting that. For example, one of the things in my belief that that we need to strive for is sort of that full day kindergarten, is really thinking about how that happens. That's an issue of equity. It's right now you have to be able to pay the tuition, and you have to be lucky to be in the lottery and chosen. So how do we build that case? And it's not a 1 year done. It's a multi-year pronged approach, and really thinking about, do you have space for it? And working with the town to think about creatively how to make that happen. Are there efficiencies? Are there ways we can work together? Are there departments where we can consolidate and use resources of the town in support of the schools? And you've already done some of that. You already have a joint facilities, and joint technology. I don't know about nursing and how that works, but is there a way to sort of consolidate any other sort of services and look at contractual pieces that might be done in conjunction with the town? I think I'm up to 12, but I don't know.
So I have a follow-up
Okay.
on what we were just discussing. When we were on the site visit, it does sound like Melrose has kind of a unique structure, that there are some shared responsibilities in terms of facilities, or like your school nurses are part of the Department of Public Health,
Yes.
things like that. But it's done within a city structure with a mayor. But you were also speaking in kind of great detail about the town structure. So what is your experience with dealing with a town structure, and how that budget process works versus a city structure?
So I know it as a resident. I live in a town. I'm a town meeting member. I think I've been elected twice, because I know I've run twice and been on the ballot. I think I'm up next year because I'm not on the ballot this year. So I have one more year on. So I've participated as a town meeting member, which includes in our structure many town meetings, and I've seen the superintendent and the director of, or assistant superintendent of finance defend their budget, and been involved in the process and watched the process at our finance committee, and our FinCom, as we call it in our town, and watch that defense of the budget and how it works its way through the process. And the role that the FinCom also plays in looking at efficiencies and collaboration and communication among departments. As a town meeting member, I've brought my own warrants in collaboration with other town meeting members to move forward specific things that we believed in. One was, I had the honor to work with another town meeting member to change the name of our board of selectmen. It was called Board of Selectmen, and we went through and made the change to call it Select Board. That was in honor of Teresa, my daughter, who said one day, why are only men allowed on the board of selectmen? I said, no, she was 9 years old. And that changed. It took 4 years to make that change, but they finally did make that change. And it was through a warrant article at town meeting. We did that. I had the pleasure also to work with a great group of neighbors to institute a human rights commission in the town, and worked with them to spearhead that, and I had the privilege to talk at town meeting about the importance of what we believed, and have served one term. My term is almost up, on the Dedham Human Rights Commission, and used that structure. So, and that Human Rights Commission works with the Select Board and Historical Commission. And so I'm aware of all that town structure just as a town resident, and my ability to sort of engage. And my sense is trying to model for my own children what civic engagement means. Because if I want them to be civically engaged, I've got to also, do it and show what that looks like. And model for my 2 young children, not so young anymore, sorry. In my eyes, they're always young.
Well, Westford also recently made the change to our select board.
Yes.
The floor is now open, school committee members, for.
Oh, we made it to 12.
Yes, we did.
Okay, great.
We did. So the floor is open for follow-up questions. Wave a hand at me if you have one. I know I had one. I know we were just talking about municipalities and budgets, but zipping back to the curriculum, I know we heard several times on your site visit, and you mentioned it this evening about personalized learning. If you could, talk more for those who aren't familiar with that concept or how it's been implemented in Melrose, I'd be curious.
So the idea of personalized learning comes from, sometimes it's called competency-based learning and mastery-based learning. Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine have instituted competency-based learning. So it's the idea that here's the standard or the competency, and there are multiple pathways to get there, and students are working at their own pace towards that particular standard and competency. And when they've reached it, they move on and they have to show mastery of that particular standard. And there are multiple pathways to that particular standard. And it's a way to really personalize learning. And it's different than differentiation. Differentiation meaning we're meeting individual students' needs. It's really, it's a real student-driven process because the student takes responsibility for meeting the standard. Instead of me, teacher, providing all the information, and you learn it, it's student, here's the goals and the objectives, and here are resources and materials and pathways to get you to that outcome and that goal. Make some choices about how you're going to get there. And then when you get there, there's a way that you can show that you can show your competency or your mastery of that particular goal, objective, or standard. When 5 years ago, our superintendent said, I want to investigate this, we decided that it was a vision that sort of felt that was the way we wanted to prepare our students for the 21st century. And so we started engaging in a process of learning more. And as a district, we designed what we believe. Like, we didn't want to take what New Hampshire, Vermont, or Maine were doing, or some of the charter schools might be doing around personalized learning. We wanted to really develop what our vision of personalized learning was. And so we developed that vision over 2 years. And now we're in the process. It's been slowed down a bit by the pandemic, but we're trying to actualize it. And that vision includes, flexible learning environments where kids are learning in flexible ways. And technology may be a tool to allow that. They're student-centered and student-driven, where the student sets their goals and creates their own actions and is involved in their own learning. It's universally designed, so all students can have access. And we're providing multiple means of expression and representation and multiple ways for students to engage in the content. There are clear competencies and learning progression. So you know, here's my outcome and here are all the steps I can take to get there, that I need to take to get there. And we're clearly articulating that to students. And so we have a personalized learning cohort. We had 16 teachers last year. We have 26 this year who are creating some models of what that looks like in our classrooms. So we're really designing our own model of what personalized learning looks like in our classrooms, and then trying to continually to share that with educators and build more structures and put it, like, for one example is our program of studies for this year, for next year, has really explicitly that all students in our 9th grade will do a portfolio and of their work to show their mastery of our habits of learning. In that work, they'll show how they're self-directed learners, how they're problem solvers, how they're clear communicators, and how they're responsible citizens. So that's a piece that we've actualized into our program of studies based upon some of the work. And so that's our one of many first steps that we're trying to get to sort of actualize some of that work into our classrooms, into our program of studies, into our curriculum.
I'll pounce on a follow-up. What you're describing sounds like quite the educational mind shift. And I'm sure when you introduce an initiative or like personalized learning, that you're going to have early adopters who just jump right on and, you know, both feet in. And you probably have other, you know, members either of the community or of your own teaching staff who are like, not so sure about this. So how do you, as an educational leader, bring forth a change like that in a way that brings everyone along at a pace that they're comfortable with, so that you can create kind of successful, sustainable, embedded change?
Yeah, I think the key is to make it a teacher-led process. And so it's a very teacher-led process. We've identified some teacher leaders who are leading the process, but we're also cognizant of developing other leaders because we don't want one of those leaders to move on or go somewhere else and not have a void. So we want to build capacity for all of our educators to be leaders. And so the hope is that we're developing really strong teacher leaders that can then sustain the work over time. And teachers telling other teachers, hey, this is what I tried in my classroom, is much more sustainable than having, and it's also contextualized. Like, we couldn't take what Maine was doing in a classroom in Maine, and we visited schools in Maine and New Hampshire and saw what they were doing, but we couldn't take what they were doing and put it in Melrose. That doesn't fit the context, doesn't fit our particular demographics, our community. So we took that and said to teachers, like, how do we actualize that and make it happen here and create models that are sustainable within our school community, and having teachers share that. And so they're documenting their process, our 26 teachers in our personalized learning cohort. They're creating blog posts, videos, materials. And yesterday was our last professional development day of the year. They were showcasing their work. A portion of the day was them sharing with other educators and getting feedback too on their work, and sharing resources, some of what they've learned. And that's how we're making sort of change over time and sort of moving our classrooms from teacher directed to student centered. And then our next step is that they're student driven.
Thank you. Sounds like an interesting initiative. Other questions from the committee? I'll give everybody a moment to think. This is your last call. I'm just looking over my site visits notes, so give me a moment there, because I know I had another. I made a note that someone referred to a late start. Oh, sorry, Avery. Sorry, you're up.
No, that's fine. I had looked back at my notes, and one of your teachers commented that a sign of a good leader is one who can create other leaders. How do you think you've gone about creating other leaders and supporting those to feel like they can become a leader?
Asking them. So one of the things we did, the timeline's a little blurry at the moment, but we had a partnership with Salem State, where Salem State did a CAGS program on site, master's CAGS for folks who wanted to think about administration. We funded it creatively through the professional development funding. We didn't pay the whole thing, we paid a portion for staff who were interested. But a component of that was, if you didn't want to do the whole CAGS program, was just do the teacher leader portion, which was 1 year of coursework, which provided the staff some opportunity to get a little more knowledge about teacher leadership and what are the skills involved. There is a set of skills, and there's a set of research and body of knowledge that can support the development of teacher leaders. We've been creative in some of our budget to include some stipended positions that allow, and this also provides another feedback loop for our curriculum leaders, to have a math leader at our high school who provides support, like in department meetings and assessments, and can lead for smaller professional learning communities and help develop resources for the staff. And so that's an opportunity to provide another layer where teachers are also giving us feedback, but it's a layer for teacher leaders, right? And teacher voice, which also helps us retain staff. Staff feel committed and feel like there's an opportunity for them to continually grow, which I think is really important for veteran staff, is they want to feel that there's an opportunity to continuously grow and take on new roles. Many still want to be teachers too. They don't want to necessarily be an administrator, but they do want to have access to being a leader. Really trying to identify folks who are willing to take on that challenge and asking them and saying, I think you'd be really great. My experience with teacher leaders is I really just want a great teacher who loves teaching and loves children and is great in the classroom and is willing to work with other educators. And over time, they learn and develop skills and try to coach alongside them and work alongside them to develop those skills. I've had the privilege to work with many educators over the years that have done some phenomenal things. I've been honored to work with many and see them grow into great leaders. Some who've become school leaders as well, and district leaders too, in some cases.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. School committee members, last call, wave a hand. Otherwise, we will turn the mic back to Dr. Adams for any closing remarks you'd wish to share with us.
I think I've said this multiple times in multiple groups, so excuse me, but I'll say it again. And it's been an hour and a half, I think. Oh, an hour and a half since I said it, so I'll say it again. It's been an honor to be here in Westford. You have a very dedicated staff, amazing students, and wonderful parents and caregivers, and it's been an honor. There's a lot of care and love for each other and the community, and wishes to do the best, make the best decision for Westford so that it can continue to move forward. A deep desire to be collaborative across all departments, across educators. I also am super grateful to Dorothy and her support from MASC. And the professionalism of the community and the school committee. It's been an honor to go through the process. I'd be honored and humbled to be the Westford Public Schools Superintendent. And it seems like a great community. I also wish you the best in trying to make the best decision for your community. It's an important one. And it feels like Westford definitely deserves the best. So I hope you luck in deciding, making your decisions in the future.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your running the marathon today with our entire community, especially in this virtual context, which is challenging. But thank you so much. We wish you good fortune and good health. And thank you so very much for spending your time with us today. We've greatly appreciated it.
So I'm
Thanks,
gonna
Dr.
log
Adams.
off, right?
Well, it's a public meeting. You're welcome to stay with us, but I think you're going to get bumped off the panelist screen. But
Okay.
you're welcome to stay as an attendee if you'd like.
I'm driving home, so good luck. Thank you so much.
We
Drive
respect that.
safely. Thank you
Drive
so much.
safely.
Safe trip.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. So Chris, are you sharing in the chat the Survey Monkey?
I just did. Everyone should be able to access the survey. And I think we're also going to make an attempt to email it out to folks who attended we have emails through the registration, so we can send a follow-up email.
Great. Everyone who has access to it through the chat, you can access it there, or hopefully we'll figure out the technology to send it to you via email, and you can provide your feedback to us. For the public's information, that survey is, my understanding is it is anonymous, but you get to check off kind of, what your role is in the community. Are you a parent? Are you a community member who doesn't have kids in the school? Are you a student or a young alumni? And are you a member of our staff, of course? So you can note that on your feedback, but the feedback is anonymous. And your feedback will be supplied to the entire school committee, and we'll have access to that before any decisions are made. So we do appreciate you participating in this process and giving us your feedback on all the candidates. Now, this is an opportunity for anyone to share other information that the committee has kind of gathered through the process about Dr. Adams. And I believe, was it Chris, were you doing reference checks for Dr. Adams?
Do we want to start? I don't know if people want to share from the site visits. I mean, I know a lot of us were in and out, so do folks have particular points that they wanted to bring up, maybe things that were themes that we heard throughout the day or notable points?
So I can start there because I was in all of Dr. Adams' site visits. I would say the consistent themes that we heard from, so let me back up. We met with staff who work under Dr. Adams. We met with some of her colleagues. We met with some of her supervisors. We met with parents. We met with the school committee. The consistent themes that we heard were some of the same things we heard tonight. A lot of collaboration, a lot of communication. They describe her as being very data-driven, that she comes to the table with as much information as possible and tries to collect that information before making a decision. They also talked about her holistic approach to decision-making and to, excuse me, and to being a supervisor, in that she builds relationships. She builds on a reputation of respect and mutual communication and collaboration. And that honestly was a theme throughout all of the stakeholder groups that we met with, and very consistent with her answers tonight as well.
Valerie?
I just jotted down a couple quotes that struck me through the site visits. I mean, quote is kind of loose term, but we heard about from her central office staff about she brought cohesion. She had a clear vision that all students can learn, and then exemplifies that and looks for educational equity. She thinks of herself as a lifelong learner and helps them to think of themselves as professional learners. And that, she said it a lot tonight too, that build capacity, we heard that a lot. And that someone actually said that her approach is to say to them, I think you can do this, and here's how you should try. Not just, like kind of giving a path. Another quote I wrote down was, relying on data is a strategy she utilizes effectively to minimize emotionality around certain issues. The emotion could be rising, but Margaret is not. And then another quote I wrote down was, she's always thinking of ways to move our district forward. She's got a list ready to go. Alicia just said the well-prepared one. Oh, Margaret is a planner and has the foresight of a crystal ball and knows what's going to happen 2 steps ahead. The last one from a teacher. Margaret is most empathetic of the plight of day-to-day classroom experience. So those are just some quotes I jotted down as people were talking that really stuck with me and wanted to share.
Mig 10.
So through the site visits, I stayed mostly in the early morning sessions with curriculum directors, central office staff, and then 2 of the superintendents. Which so one of the common theme is communications. So all of them are talking about the communications, articulate the needs of the school district, the champion schools, but also understand where one town is one pie. The district is not very heavy on administrative. Also, the other thing which mentioned by multiple person is the education equity through multiple lens, and then the cultural proficiency. Anisha also mentioned the holistic approach to kids. On the leadership side, she believes in people, coaching people, bring professional development into teachers and then into staff. So data-driven decision, a lot of good stuff.
Go ahead, Chris. I had just a few other choice things that I kind of highlighted. It's funny, Valerie and we both started the same thing, that she was the most empathetic to teachers and their needs and the experience in the classroom on a daily basis. They also seem to have a very strong culture in their central office of supportiveness and redundancy. Their central office team has gone through some transitions in the last year, and she was cited as really the go-to resource during the pandemic. And I felt that, and this was more of an overall theme and impression on the day, I felt that by us visiting them, that we were imposing a certain amount of trauma on the town of Melrose. There was really some, while glowing references, there was also a bit of this fear that she might be leaving their community. One parent actually commented that she had bought a house in Melrose because of Margaret Adams, and that was rather telling. I believe there was actually one parent who might have actually teared up a bit at the thought that she might leave their district. So I felt guilty that we were imposing trauma on them. But it really was there were a lot of common themes like that throughout the day, and she's obviously had a huge impact on her community. And Avery, other comments?
So I already had said one of them. The other was her use of these circles, and she mentioned them tonight, but I really felt that was a successful model that she's been able to replicate, and for staff, for parents, for kids, as a communication tool. And I was really kind of enamored with the idea of a circle of communication. And the other piece, when we talked about failures or challenges, somebody said that Margaret always, she never said that we failed. She said, we didn't fail. What did we learn? And so to be able to take the positive out of it and turn it around, turn the conversation right around to a positive and learn from things, I thought was very telling.
Any other comments on the site visits, or we'll turn it over to Chris for any additional information?
Sure. So, and I'll kind of combine my site visit comments with my reference checks because to be honest, there was a lot of consistency and commonality. And so I think I'm going to really just reinforce what we've just heard. I think the themes for me that I heard the most were this, I heard multiple people say she has a unique lens for equity. That, that was a very consistent way of putting it, and a very clear vision that all students can learn, and that she exemplifies that. And so I heard that repeatedly. And then, so that's kind of one piece. And then the other piece I think I heard the most was what we've also talked about is her ability to do professional development, support staff, and to build this capacity. I heard that repeatedly in the reference checks, that she builds capacity so that there is redundancy in the system. So I'm looking at specific things. I had one reference check with a colleague who actually is the executive director of the educational collaborative that Melrose is a part of. And so has worked closely with Dr. Adams. And while the collaborative is a resource for the district, she really felt the same of Dr. Adams, that Dr. Adams was a resource to her. And the specifics that she gave were sheltered English immersion and ELL, given Dr. Adams' past experiences, that she was a real valuable resource there, and the restorative practices that Avery just was alluding to. She said she was smart and warm, that people were really drawn to her. And really, I mean, the other thing is I didn't hear any major concerns from folks about making that transition to superintendent. I also spoke to a principal in her district, similar themes, really talking a lot about the professional development. Said, you're not going to find many people in the region with her knowledge of teaching and learning and professional development. Called her the go-to central administrator, and cited that they do weekly meetings where she meets with the principals each week and really acts as a support. And then again, also talked about that equity lens, understanding of cultural responsiveness, and just how to have those conversations. I think that's, again, a lot of commonality there, but those were some of the highlights.
All right, well, thank you for doing those checks, Chris, and thanks for sharing that information, everyone. I know it's hard to be in every single meeting, so I'm glad that we have a bit of a chance to debrief, even if not deliberate. We will hold all the deliberation part for the 18th. So for those who are following the process, tomorrow is another day and another finalist. So we'll be welcoming Dr. Michelle Shannon to Westford tomorrow, and there will be another marathon of meetings during the day, and school committee will be back at 7:30 tomorrow night for Dr. Michelle Shannon's interview. And thank you to everyone for joining. Please do send us your feedback. We want to hear it. And since we are in an official meeting, I suppose we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor, Avery?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Aye, that would be unanimous. Have a good evening, everyone.
See you guys in the morning.
Good night, everyone.
Night.